Welcome back to another episode of 22 at the Lips. I'm your host, Alexis Stout, and today I want to do a solo episode on a special population that I hold near and dear to my heart, geriatrics. I love our little elderly patients. Quick little caveat, I feel like they fall into four categories. You have your geriatrics who are very spunky. They're the ones that they have made it to the age of 80, and gosh darn it if nobody's going to tell them what to do. They can be very stubborn, very matter of fact, very however you want to call it. You have your grumpy ones who, gosh, nothing you do is right, and oh god, they don't talk a lot, they don't even crack a smile, they don't laugh, they don't there's zero emotion besides just anger. Um, you have your very anxious old ladies, and they're the ones that they gasp at everything, every small little thing. They're gripping your shirt, gripping whenever you're trying to move the patient. Every bump in the road, they're gripping the side rails. Every little thing makes them jump. The sweet little anxious ladies. And then my favorite ones, the sweet ones, the ones that they just melt your heart. They're so frail, so tiny. Little MeeMaw maybe weighs 80 pounds soaking wet. Little Peepaw with, he's got his suspenders on. I'm sorry. I really love the geriatrics. They're my favorite population that we serve. Um, I also I appreciate the elderly patient population, if nothing else, because it's never cut and dry. You do have your common calls ranging from your small matters like UTIs. And when it comes to the UTIs, we have to be careful of, you know, little tiny Momo with a raging UTI. She's going to have a right hook that can match Mike Tyson himself. And I'm not talking about the recent match. I'm talking about the actual Mike Tyson. Um, we all know to watch out for those because they don't know what's going on. They've got the UTI. They're probably septic. Anyways, you also have your common calls like your falls, whether they're harmed or not, whether it's just a lift assist. I personally appreciate a good lift assist. Um, I always like to tell myself whenever we have a fall patient with especially the elderly ones, it's an acronym in my head of HNBH, and it literally on your head to toe, head, neck, back, hips. Those are your common breaks, common fractures, common injuries with our fall patients, with our elderly population. And you also have your major calls like your MIs, your CVAs, your cardiac arrest, all of the really big ones that require a lot of diesel and, in my opinion, and for me, sweat. Um, but I feel like there is just such a large umbrella for these elderly patients that it's not always just one thing. It's not always just a UTI, but it's also a UTI and now being septic. It's not just the myocardial infarction, but I'm also worried about something else that could be going on. But under this umbrella, a couple of a couple of differentials that I feel like we should have kind of going on in the back of our mind with every elderly patient. And I'm not talking about treating all of these. There's no way. But kind of whenever you're going to get your differential, you have your big umbrella that everything falls under. Whether you want to categorize it into your ABCs and what could be affecting them, whether you want to categorize it into thinking big picture and funneling it into smaller picture like I do, it's not always just the one differential. It could be several things going on. And a couple that I want to highlight, and I say a couple, I'm about to go through a whole list. So buckle up, put on your seatbelt. Here we go. Starting with our huge umbrella, we have syncope. And what you have to look out for with the elderly patients with syncope is, as we know, what caused it? What happened before? Did you fall after you passed out? Did you hit your head? Are you on blood thinners? Are you on big umbrella? Dehydration, diabetics, dementia. So no, these are not in alphabetical order. Alzheimer's, and this isn't necessarily that the patient is altered according to the nursing home and the patient's baseline is confused as all get out and they're still in 1943. This could be as simple as maybe they are normally able to tell you what day of the week it is and now they can. It could be as simple as Maybe they just forgot what they ate last, whatever. I don't know. But it also could be a matter of, is this early onset? It's not necessarily that we need to be frustrated that the nursing home or family called because the patient's confused, but are they more confused than normal? And asking, how long has this been going on? This could be the first event, this could be the sixth time this week, but there are other things that need to be tested with the confusion that we need to be bringing these patients in for. Um, Another one is just the general unsteadiness on their feet, whether that could be linked with weakness, whether it could be linked with dizziness, vertigo, if they have past deficits from a stroke. Um, where was I? Yes, constipation or bowel issues. And it is frustrating whenever you get called at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and some older patient is calling because they haven't pooped in 3 days. But also, let's be so for real, that's not okay. That should not be happening, and if it is, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be evaluated by a doctor who either prescribes them a stool softener or they run tests and they find a small bowel obstruction. You never know. Um, Pressure ulcers that are leading to sepsis, arthritic issues, Parkinson's, seizures, kidney disease and failure, sepsis, kidney or liver impairment. So this is why we're careful with our narcotic dosing. DVTs, thyroid issues, pneumonia because of a decreased mobility and reduced pulmonary function and ability to even cough, CHF and pulmonary edema, increase in cancer, COPD flare-ups, polypharmacology. And we know the patients that, especially in my opinion, from nursing homes, or the patients that don't have an established primary care physician and the ER is their doctor. It's that list of medications, and you ask yourself, how is this person even taking all of these meds in one day? How are you able to digest all of this? There's no way. Polypharmacology, arrhythmias and arteriosclerosis, and why the brain bleeds. Because we also need to think about, especially with the confusion calls, and that's why I hate them and I love them, just because there are so many things that could be going on that I cannot give a differential for why they're confused, but they need to be checked out. But what could it be? Um, we recently had a patient that I am 99.9% sure had an aneurysm because the family got home and she's sitting on the floor confused out of her mind. And she would tell us stuff and we're trying to ask her what's going on, trying to get just some baseline of communication of, is her thought process even making sense? And after she would say something that was so off the wall, she would start crying. Whew. In the moment, it was hard to feel sympathetic because I can't start a line because she's grabbing my arm and she's telling me that someone needs to get checked out or something like that. I don't even remember what she was saying. But I think it's also key to remember that sometimes, even though your patient's having a stroke and they're saying words out of their mind or they're talking out of their mind, they're confused, maybe they're septic, maybe there's something else going on, whatever it is, they could still hear you. Anyways, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot that we need to be going in with these elderly patient calls, not just thinking of one diagnosis, not just thinking of chest pain equals an MI, or I don't know, new onset weakness equals stroke, but kind of thinking more broadly and thinking of multiple things that could be going on because these patients are older. Um, a couple of little key tips and tricks to remember. Remember that a DNR does not mean do not treat. A DNR means do not resuscitate. That doesn't mean do not treat. With these DNRs, as we know with hospice, making sure that the hospice healthcare personnel, nurse, whoever is aware that the patient is possibly going to the ER. It's a very big gray area of, you don't want that person not to receive care because they're still alive, but also if someone on hospice goes to the ER for something related to their diagnosis of why they're on hospice, they lose hospice. And that varies state to state, area to area. I get that, but that's just the general what I know from hospice. Um, I think it's also important to familiarize yourself with the DNRs that are in your state. For example, where I work in Michigan, we have what's called an MI post. And then in that, there are basically three different sections or three different tiers, however you want to look at it. One of which entails that the person may receive chest compressions. That's something very important to know. Um, I don't know. I feel like DNRs are so complicated now. It's not just, hey, if my heart stops, don't do compressions. There's so many more new levels. And it's not a matter of just asking, do they have a DNR, but actually evaluating it, which when you're in the situation of you have a person you're about to have to start working and the family can't find it, that's not fun. Um, oh, Older patients also have decreased pain receptors and decreased liver and kidney metabolism and shrinking peripheral nerves. So be careful when you're giving your narcotics. With the liver not being able to metabolize as quickly and the kidneys decreased mobility and ability to metabolize, that's a mouthful. You want to be careful pushing something that has a demand on those systems, long story short, because it's going to have a slower time to actually absorb, a slower time to actually kick in. So by the time that you've given them their weight-based 1 microgram per kilogram dose, by the time that actually kicks in, you could be repeating that dose because they still feel the pain, and then that's going to hit all at once. Nobody wants to Narcan MeeMaw. Nobody wants to. And if you do, shame on you, get out of this field. Something else, kind of what I've already touched on and what I've been hindering on, is a fall call, maybe minute or major. It just depends on what you're looking for. So be thinking about what caused the fall. I like to prove, especially whenever you're getting that refusal for people who just needs help up and he's already embarrassed because he needs help up. Um, he wants control over something, so he wants to sign a refusal. Going ahead and going through a differentials of, is this cardiac or is this neuro related? And it is one of those until proven otherwise. And that does include when you've got them all situated and they just want to go back to bed, just reiterating, hey, this could be something serious. I want you to consider getting checked out, whatever that may look like for you or your agency. Older patients also have softer bones, so they break more easily. And that's why you have older patients with rib fractures or injured necks from ground level falls. Um, I'm not a huge fan of C-collars. I'm not a huge fan of the further cause of injury they can create. However, I also know that fragile little MeeMaw who looks frail is definitely going to be frail on the inside. Me rolling out the bed and falling on the ground isn't going to result in a neck injury for me, but it could for MeeMaw. Speaking of falls, their skin tears easily, so be careful. Whenever you're about to start an IV and you have that little tourniquet on the arm, I personally, I get their sweater or some item of clothing and put it underneath the tourniquet just because I'm putting it so far up that like it's not going to cross contaminate and make my area antiseptic, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. It's more of just because I don't want to add one more little injury to MeeMaw, who already has gone through it and she fell and she's scared and she doesn't want to be there. I'm already nervous about poking MeeMaw because I hate missing on our older patients. It makes me feel inadequate. Um, when they don't want to go, maybe sometimes they're just scared. I think, and this is what's proven correctly for me, but just explaining why you want them to go and reminding them they do have the options. Sometimes it's a matter of they feel out of control because they had to call emergency services, they had to call 911, they had to call for somebody else to come and help them. And it's not that they're being stubborn to be a little toot, but they're scared. Kind of putting yourself in their situation of you've lived this long, now you're scared, you're not able to take care of yourself. You don't feel like it's that big of an issue because maybe you just don't know, looking at it through that lens. Just because the older patient is hard of hearing doesn't mean they're dumb. I understand sometimes you have to talk louder. I've done it, but that doesn't mean you have to shout and dumb things down and speak slower. And I know I would be embarrassed. Sometimes you have to, sometimes it's just that way, but it's not always. Um, Loneliness has a simple treatment. Be nice. That little peepaw or meemaw in the nursing home at home who's called and they don't really have a big issue and it's already late in the night. You don't feel like being up, or you don't feel like running that call. You're behind charts, whatever it is. That was somebody's someone. That could very well be someone's mother or father. How would you want yours treated? I think that puts things in a bigger perspective, because especially when I think about in a couple of, I'd say in a couple, like in 10, 15 years, if that's my mom or dad, you know? And the most important one, and the one that needs to be stated, is to report your elder abuse and remind your patient that they have rights. Sometimes the elderly patient may feel like they don't have the ability to speak out because they're totally reliant on whoever is their caregiver. Sometimes it's that they're in the nursing home and you need to ask them, are they nice to you here? I just, I, it makes me sad that elder abuse is a thing, but I know it's a thing, obviously. But it makes me even sadder knowing that if I saw something and I didn't say it, the rest of that person's life, they're going to have to live in some form of misery that I could have helped to create a resolution to. And that's not just elderly patients, it's your pediatrics, it's people in general. If you see abuse, report it. We know that. But I feel like it kind of gets tossed to the wayside with the elderly patients. But that is all I have. Just remembering being nice, especially once you get them out of their shell, once you get them to crack a smile, especially if you can get them talking, it kind of takes away a lot of that small talk space that you have to interact with. But that's not the point. That is all I had. If there are any tips for dealing with your geriatric patients, if you have anything that you want to go ahead, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Um, as always, DMs are open, comments are always on. Let me know what you think. And as I end every single episode, so with that.
The 22 at the Lips podcast is designed to support, not replace, the relationship that exists between a practitioner and his or her medical director. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, guest, and not necessarily of Master Medics. The information provided during this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for your approved protocols.